All right. Good?
Yeah, we're ready.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for watching. Welcome to our series where we're just interviewing different trainers and finding out their background and their history and how they got to where they are today. So all really fun and exciting. Our guest this morning, we have Barbara Schwerdt, who is a longtime dog trainer, fantastic presenter and speaker. I've seen her seminars and stuff like that. So she's part of NACSW, and for those of you that don't know, NACSW is the National Association of Canine Scent Work. They're the original certifying body of nose work and kind of created the sport as we know it today. So there's lots of different offshoots, but NACSW, we owe them a lot. So anyway, Barbara Schwerdt, she was one of the original instructors in the very first training class. She's been doing it since basically they invented it. And I mean, they didn't invent dog sniffing, but put together the sport. So anyway, do you want to fill in a little bit of that early background and a little bit more about your what you do with NACSW and all that?
Okay. So I am one of the original instructors way back in, 2009 maybe. What else can I tell you? I do a lot of things for NACSW right now. I'm a trial judge, certifying official. I'm also part of the committees that work on not only the continuing education for current certified instructors, but also new instructor education. And so I'm excited to be on the education side of the organization.
Yeah, cool. And that's basically putting together the instructor course and modifying it and stuff like that. That's it. Or the webinars?
So the instructor course is now an 8-day, currently it's an 8-day program. 4 days, you come for 4 days, or we come to you depending on the year and the need and what's happening. And then you kind of go back for 6 months or so and work on some of those things. And then you come back for the last 8 days. In the middle there's a midterm exam. So I'm on the committee that developed it and continues to modify it and change it. And I also score the exams and track the scores into the instructor database. I've been really fortunate that I've been able to actually teach the course a couple of times. I co-taught with Ron. And so right now, Amy and Jill are kind of carrying the torch, and they're splitting. You'll get Jill for 4 days, and then you'll get Amy for 4 days. So we're kind of covering it that way. And right now, most of the courses are happening in Southern California. There was one scheduled in Vegas, but because of what's happening right now, that's kind of been postponed. We've also been able to go to Australia, and we've had those folks come here as well. So trying to cover all of our bases.
That's so cool. And I think you mentioned you're going to Australia soon?
I will be. Well, the plan was October, and I'll kind of hit. There's nose work happening in Australia, and some of those pioneers have come to the States a number of times for a number of courses, and so I've been invited now to come and kind of spend time with a couple of different groups of nose work folks out there. So hopefully that's still happening in October.
Yeah. Fingers crossed for you. I think so I did my instructor certification in 2015. The end of 2015 is when I was done with my CNWI. And I think I can't remember her name, or the two gals, they were like the Australian girls. That was the first time coming over.
Mm-hmm.
And since then they've been doing that. But I used to live in Australia, so I love it a lot. I'll keep my fingers crossed that you get to go.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, cool. I forgot to mention earlier, so and just a couple names that you mentioned. So I think probably most people watching this will know who you are and know about the organization. But so NACSW has 3 founders, which are Amy Harrow, Jill Marie O'Brien, and Ron Gaunt. And Ron passed away in 2018.
Yeah, I think it's been, sounds about right.
Yeah. 2017 and 2018. I was 6 months pregnant. I think that's how I remember.
Old as Mo, go backwards.
Yeah. Anyway, super cool. So tell me about those early days of nose work? Like, were you already training? Did you already know Amy and Jill, and how did you figure out,
Right.
starting?
So, interestingly enough, I was teaching obedience classes for Karen Taylor at My Best Friend Obedience.
Yeah.
She kind of heard the rumblings of nose work being offered, and so she opened up a class. And believe it or not, this was so wonderful. Amy and Ron and Jill all came and taught those early classes all together, all three of them, in this parking lot in North Hollywood. And we did that for quite a while. Dogs were, at that time, dogs were on primary. So they were either looking for food or a ball. And we had people, it was a parking lot. It was literally an empty parking lot. So people would load stuff in their car and bring it to class, and we'd set up, if it could fit in your garage and fit in your car, we pretty much had it set up in that parking lot. So what was cool was every week was different. People just brought different stuff and we arranged it differently. And so we taught like that for months and months and months in this vacant parking lot.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. I mean, just how much it's evolved, but like what it is now, I think people would be amazed that it just started out in a, parking lot, and yeah, you were like, whatever we have, bring it. There's no like, contamination of odor of like Barbara's things and Amy's things, and
right.
Making sure it's a sterile environment or whatever. You just had
right. The very, very first group started at the SPCA LA in Long Beach. So that was actually the very first like official. And so then I believe our classes were probably the second.
Yeah.
So that's the only place that I know of that classes were happening. So
yeah, cool. And how many people were in the class, and did any of the instructors bring their dogs as well, or they were just working with your dogs?
So the only instructors at that time were Amy, Ron, and Jill.
Yeah.
And so the class was full. Karen didn't want to market it to her instructors. She wanted to market it to outside people to get more people. And so there wasn't even a spot available when I first started seeing it happening. I was teaching obedience classes, and then my class would finish, and then Amy, Ron, and Jill would come and they would do nose work, and I would just stay because I was there.
Yeah.
And then a spot opened up, and then I was able to join the class with my very young, very out of control German Shepherd, who was at that time 10 months old. I had gotten him at 10 weeks. And by now he was 10 months old, and it was a lifesaver. Yeah, he was a handful as a puppy. I'd never raised a German Shepherd puppy before. So
yeah,
it was a lot of work.
Yeah. And that's Landis you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about Landis. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And did you have your other dog at the same time, or she passed and then you got Landis? Yeah.
No, Cassie, the dog I work now is Cassie. I've had her for
the one you said, can't remember, you mentioned an earlier dog, a Monty.
Oh, that was a German Shepherd that we found her as an adult. My husband actually found her in a parking lot as an adult, and she's the reason I'm a dog trainer. But she didn't have anything to do with. No, she had long passed since before I got Landis. So
yeah, I gotcha. Before we go on to Landis, that was actually one other thing I wanted to ask you. So when you had a Monty, because do you still teach obedience classes?
I don't anymore, but I did for, I don't know, 12 years or something.
Yeah, awesome. And do you still have a nose work class that you teach?
I do. I teach one class a week right now for NW3 Elite and Summit teams. And part of the reason for that is I have a full-time job doing something else entirely.
Yeah.
And I travel a lot. I do a lot of trials. I do a lot of workshops and things like that. So I only really can fit one class a week into my schedule. But I've had the same students with multiple, the dog passes away and then they just rotate the next dog into the class. So I've had the same students for, I don't know, 10 years probably, or 8 years.
Awesome. Yeah. I hear very good things about your class.
Oh, that's neat.
I heard one time, I think I can't remember what happened, but somehow I don't know if you still teach, but it was at Burbank. Do you still teach there?
I do.
Yeah. And like for some reason it was locked, and then everyone showed up, and so you set up containers in the parking lot or like on the sidewalk or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they said it was the best container search they'd ever done.
Yeah.
So, which I think is a really good sign of an instructor. It's not it doesn't have to be like the fanciest scent work boxes ever created or whatever, but you can put together a really good search with like understanding of odor and your search and how you put it together. So
right. Yeah. And I have that luxury because of the level of students that I train. So, I mean, that's super helpful also. I think you have to be a little bit more, you have to think a little bit more for the folks that are just getting started, in all fairness to the dog, which was something I learned all over again when I started my second dog.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so tell us about Landis.
Oh, brother. So, I was a volunteer at Pet Orphans. I did a lot of their home adoptions on the weekends, and I happened to be at Pet Orphans. I saw all the puppies come in because I knew at some point I'd probably be taking them for their home adopt. So I was on the website all the time looking at puppies. Yeah, and ironically, I saw his litter come in. He came in as wasn't even weaned puppy yet, with some litter mates and his mother. But they all look like Rottweiler puppies. German Shepherd puppies look like Rottweiler puppies. And I wasn't really looking for a puppy, and so I happened to be there dropping off paperwork from an adoption I had done the weekend before. And a volunteer came around the corner and was walking this beautiful cute little German Shepherd puppy. And I was like, well, where did that puppy come from? And she explained it was the litter that I had seen online, but that was 2 weeks ago. And now they look like German Shepherds and not Rottweilers. Not that I have anything against Rottweilers, but I wasn't even looking for a puppy. And so anyway.
Be careful, I'm a Rottweiler person.
I know.
What you say?
Not that I had it. Actually, my first German Shepherd was a Shepherd Rott mix. So
yeah.
Phew, save that. And so because I was a volunteer there and I did a lot of their adoptions, the kennel manager said, I think you should take that puppy home with you tonight. And it just so happened my husband was with me and my other dog was with me. And so we all met and it worked out fine and we brought him home. And one night, the next morning I took him back. I was like, oh my gosh, what were we thinking? He literally pushed the top off of a very kennel. I'm not kidding you. He pushed the top out. He was 10 weeks old. And so I thought, okay, smarty. So I took him out of the very kennel and I put an X-pen around him, to which he decided that was just a simple little ladder that he could climb up and over. And that was
like, this is even better.
Exactly. He's like, well, he took the top off for me. That was easy. So anyway, needless to say, that was not going to work. And I took him back. That was a Sunday morning. And on Monday morning, I was driving to work. I could not get that puppy out of my head. So I called the shelter and I say, hi, I dropped him off yesterday, but I need to come back and get him. They're like, we know, we'll hold him for you.
You're like, don't worry, I'm a very responsible dog owner.
Anyway, so we brought him home that next weekend and we had him till he died at 12. So he was awesome. Really, really, really good with people. He was like a Labrador or a Golden that way. He loved people, but other dogs not so much. So
yeah.
And years later, I was doing a demo with him at Pennsylvania camp, and I had somebody in the audience come up and ask me later if he had actually. He said, "I'm wondering if he looks like a line from a breeder in Riverside. By any chance, did he come from Riverside?" Well, actually, he did, because Pet Orphans did a lot of rescue from the shelter in Riverside. And so for all we know, he was probably a working line German Shepherd from the very beginning anyway. So anyway, I was fortunate to get into that Sunday morning Millwork class in North Hollywood when he was 10 months old. And
in the prime of adolescence at 10 months old.
Yeah. One of us was not going to survive the rest of his puppyhood, and unless I found something for him to do. So it worked out really well. And I will say that, and Ron used to laugh at me, it took about 4.5 years for us to really gel and kind of find. 4.5 years is a really long time, but you get a working shepherd, that's what you're looking at. And I had no idea. So, I mean,
Yeah.
he, thank God. I mean, I think we've saved each other's lives, really. I mean, he introduced me to this whole entire sport that I've been a part of now forever since the very beginning, and it's just been incredible.
Yeah.
So, and I had it easy with him. He was a really good nosework dog. And it wasn't until I started teaching that I thought, oh, I better start paying attention, because he really did all the work. I just threw him his ball, So
Yeah.
anyway,
that's awesome. All the things you mentioned, a few things are like all the things I love about nosework. Like, you have a difficult relationship, you start working, and like you come together as a team. It's what the dog needs. It's what you need. You're learning together. Like, you're learning how to communicate with each other. It's just like one of the things about nosework that gives me chills every time when I see that special thing, or if I'm with Buck and I'm just like, this is so, I love you so much. I can't, we just did this whole search and we communicated, and he doesn't speak English, but we
and we
like
don't
understood each
understand,
other.
and we don't understand how it is for them to be searching, but yet we do understand. Like, we can't relate to that because we don't smell like they do, right? But we can but somehow we still are able to communicate and I one of the things, I didn't know anything about dog sports. I never did dog sports, so I clearly never competed in anything. And we had that inaugural trial, and he took second place overall, and we were like, what? What? And then I guess I just got greedy. I'm like, okay. And actually, he did. I mean, I think he probably placed in every trial we ever did until he got older. It just was, it was great. So, but what I learned about that was it was really about the relation. He didn't know one way or the other if we brought home a ribbon, and so I kind of had to. He helped me put myself in check. I remember the first NW3 trial that we did, and we were experimenting with, should we tell the competitor that they got them all or not? And it was the one and only trial that ever happened. And so we did a search. It was a pretty extraordinarily big, complicated search in a winery in Livermore. And he got 2 hides, and we never found the third one. And as I was walking out, the judge said, sorry, but you missed one. And in that moment, I remember I was thinking, you know what, I should just go back to the car and pack up and go home, because we're not going to title today. And somehow between that thought and the time I got to the car, I was like, wait a minute, this is his sport. What are you doing? What are you? So
he wants to search more.
He does. Yeah, he does. And he did. And he went ahead and he did awesome the whole rest of the trial. So we didn't get a ribbon, but man, did we have a good day together. And I think that was the defining moment for me. And it took all the way to NW3 to never having had a relationship with a dog like that. The team, it's just, I just never experienced that before. And I think that was a defining moment for me. And from that point forward, all the searches were for him. I mean, they always were, but I finally got it in my head.
Totally. I think that's really cool, because it is a thing people struggle with. And I get it. It's hard. Like, especially now when the wait for trials is so long and you have to travel and the expense, and, that's fine for some people, but not, it's a big deal. And like to miss one and just like that crappy feeling.
And in those days, quite frankly, I mean, I get it. I'm a competitor today, and we haven't gotten into a trial all year, right? So I totally get it. But in those days, we had one trial a year. They offered one trial a year. That's all there was,
Right.
So, but
same actually. Yeah, you're like, I just only had the one shot.
That's all there was offered. It wasn't even like, I didn't get into the last 10 trials I entered, right? It was like, there was one. Granted, there were all of 15 of us, but at that time, but anyway.
Yeah. So. No, that's really good perspective. I think, in my noser classes, I talk a lot about, I just because I've been in it, not from quite the early stages as you, but from only a few years after. And so I've been lucky to see kind of that evolution. Mm-hmm. But I just think, perspective is so important. So it's cool to think about that, of there only was one trial a year, and then now we're upset that we didn't get into one of the 6 trials that was offered, in the area, or
right.
I say large area because, like, we're in California, and so maybe there's a few spread out through the state.
Right. Right.
but
Well,
at least
and
you have some
it's
choices.
interesting. Yeah. And people will travel. I mean, I've flown him, not for competition, but I've flown him across the country multiple times to do Canine Nosework Camp where I was an instructor and I got to bring him. And so, yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us about early trials or do you remember the first trial that you guys did and what was that like?
Gosh, I really don't. Well, what I can tell you about early trials is this is unbelievable now. I mean, if you look at the sport now, in the early trials, you would show up in the morning and you would do your ORT for that odor or whatever it was. If it was NW1, you would do your ORT for Birch.
Yeah.
And if you passed your ORT, then you stayed and you competed in the afternoon. Can you imagine? So that's how the bunch of trials were. Talk about, so the pressure was the ORT. It wasn't, if you got through the ORT, you got the trial, no problem. So, but they were basically the same. NW1 was the 4 elements and you had to pass them all to qualify and things like that. So, it's just, the pool of certifying officials was really small. It was Amy, Ron, and Jill.
Right.
So what was cool was if you trained with them, you probably had a pretty good chance that you knew what you were gonna see. So
right.
I think that was maybe a little bit of the problem as we started to spread across the country and started to certify instructors. It was still, Amy, Ron, and Jill, and then it was me and Kimberly Buchanan and Ramona Audette, Penny Scott Fox that were certifying, and Jeff McMahon, I think in the early days, those were the folks that were going out and then being certifying officials. And, we were putting stuff up that we had seen in classes because we trained with Amy, Ron, and Jill, right? But the rest of the country was like, what? So
what are you guys doing in California?
Exactly. Yeah. So there was, there needed, and I'm so grateful for the folks on the East Coast, especially in Massachusetts. They were like, hey, we don't know what the heck you people are doing. Like, what is that? So it was really helpful for the instructor course. It was really helpful for the certifying official program. It was good to hear because we didn't know what we didn't know. We trained with those people. They put the hides out. We did fine. You go somewhere else that never seen anything like that, and it wasn't anybody's fault, but
right.
It was just like, oh, okay. So we had to kind of backtrack a little bit and go, oh, okay, let's make this a little more standardized. So, which was great, because then we had the certifying official program, and then we had before that we had the instructor program, and so. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, man, it's come so far from just, I mean, one of the videos they show the instructor course, I don't know if they still do it, but it's like one of the very first searches that Ron's doing in Amy's old backyard, like tiered ice or something. And it's just like a Labrador finding his toy who's like hidden in the top bushes or something like that.
Right.
Anyway, just how far it's come from
what
it is now.
I mean, if you think about it, they came from a detection background. So people hide drugs everywhere, right? So they had to train dogs to use their noses and figure out, oh, it's probably not here, but it's coming from somewhere else, kind of thing. So I mean, that was really the basis of where that all came from, was detection training. So that's kind of what was handed down to us.
Yeah, which I think is a great foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that I want to circle back a little bit more to Landis, and because he was only a toy reward dog, right?
He was.
Yeah. But there was one other thing that you had mentioned as far as it took you 4 years to really gel. And I just thought that was such a interesting, like, it's such a good point that I feel like it's easy, if you just start and then you do a couple classes to not understand why, it feels like it's been a long time. You've done 4 sets of 6-week classes or whatever, that is a good amount of time, but like really how long it takes to learn the sport, to learn to read your dog, for your dog to understand what's going on, like for you to communicate is
one of the things that I think not that I think that I know, and I did the same thing with my second dog. And you have to understand, when I got Landis, I didn't know anything about how to build a dog, right? I just listened to what they said. They're like, just stay on primary. There's no, Ron would tell you that the dogs don't really care if they're looking for a hot dog or a ball, right? And he certainly didn't. I mean, he probably would have eaten a hot dog and still looked for the ball. When I started this sport, and this is what I did, I put blank boxes in my car because we weren't even using odor at the time. And I sent an email to everybody I knew. And I said, hey, I'm doing this new sport. Can I have about 10 or 15 minutes of your time? And I mean, we did searches in the tire shop. We did searches in my mechanic shop. We did searches in my CPA's office. We did searches in my chiropractor's office. We did search. I can't even list all of the millions of places that I got 3 boxes out, put his ball in one. And so he just learned that if we were going somewhere in the car, it was either going to the vet or we were doing a search. I mean, that was just like, that's all we ever did.
Yeah.
And he looked for his ball everywhere. I mean, I can't think of a place that he hadn't looked for a ball. Right.
Yeah.
So when you have that kind of a foundation on a dog, you're not so worried about, and I was fortunate. I wasn't worried about slippery floors or shiny floors. I wasn't worried about an outside area that had a train going by. I wasn't worried about, I mean, all the things that are concerns to people when they go to trials. And I think, you know, with this new dog I have, it's a different story. But with him, fortunately, I don't know if it's because he just came that way as a working line dog, and it didn't matter. It was all about finding the ball. And we did work for his ball for 8 or 9 months before. And the only reason we put him on odor is because of the trial, right? Because otherwise he didn't. And when I traveled with him, I didn't want to put odor in my room, in my hotel room. So he'd look for his ball, and, you know, I teach all day. And then now what am I going to do? Oh, so let's do a vehicle search, or let's do this, or let's do that. So
nice.
Anyway.
Now, was he just reactive to other dogs, or
it was bad?
Did he ever get in fights?
No. Well, no, because I managed it. I mean, thank God I'm a professional dog trainer, and so I was able to manage it.
Yeah.
But I mean, we tried agility. That was ridiculous. I mean, there, you know, just the sheer volume of the number of dogs that he had to, you know, he probably would have been a really good dock diving dog, but he could have never stood in line with a dog in front of him and a dog behind him. And you know what? Nose work worked for him. And so that really became what he did and what he was really good at.
Yeah. And could he, if he saw a dog as you were walking to a search, would that throw him out, or could he then go to work after?
In our very early trial days, I don't remember if it was probably not our first trial. It was probably more like NW3 by then. Yeah. And I remember Kimberly Buchanan was the gate steward at this particular trial. And something happened. Somebody took the wrong path back to the car or something. And anyway, the dog got a little too close to him, and he was still pretty young, and he lost his mind. And you know what? I'll never forget this. Kim said, when I got to the door, she said, "Do you need a minute?" And I'm like, "No, we're good." That was before I had my epiphany. No, we're good. And it was awful. He couldn't even, he couldn't put it together for that search, and we did not do well. And hindsight, Kim saw the whole thing. I should have been like, "You're right. You know what? I just need a minute."
He needs a minute.
Yeah. So, and I did too, because I'm holding him, and we're ready to search and all that stuff. So anyway, if somebody offers you a minute, you should take it. That's my advice.
Totally.
No, so I mean, eventually it became, you know, he was a young working line shepherd, right? So he wasn't, as he matured, it got a little easier to manage him, but he never had a best friend until the dog we have now. So but that was fine. You know, you work with the dog you have, and that's what I ended up having to do.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really great, because I mean, all those learning moments, like I had a similar, like Buck was such an easy, I mean, he is such an easy dog. He's fine. Like, I mean, he was my first, I got him when I was 21. Like, I got my first dog that's going to be mine that I'm going to raise. It's not my family dog. And then Riley was like working line Rottweiler. She was just different. And I had a lot of like trainer growth from working with her. And I think like one of the things I love about the sport is if you have an easy dog that loves all dogs and loves all people, it's, I think, sometimes hard to understand why we have all the perimeters in place and the distance and you can't. But like, man, when you have the dog that needs it and then you have a sport that you can play with that dog, and you know, like you said, you and Landis weren't gonna, one of you wasn't gonna make it, and so what would have happened if you hadn't found Nosework? Maybe you would have found something else, but I mean, I've seen him work and like, man, he was an amazing dog. It was beautiful.
I was lucky. He was really good. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, you mentioned this too, like Noseworks changes the course of your life, like all the things that you're doing now. And I think about it too, all the people that I've met, and you know, like it's half of the classes that I teach are Nosework, and all the places I've been because of it. And it's just such a amazing, I think it's just so cool. It's definitely, it's changed my life for sure. I mean, I remember years where every other weekend I was flying somewhere to work with a group of students because, you know, at the time there were only 7 instructors and 3 founders, right? So, you know, it spread like wildfire, and we almost couldn't keep up with the demand of instruction more than anything in seminars and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I've tried a lot of places because of Nosework for sure, with him and without him. Yeah, definitely. I think that's so cool. Yeah, all the places. And I mean, I was talking to some of my students about this the other day, but the majority of people that are friends on my Facebook or that I talk to now, I've met through Nosework, really. And like Denise Funk, she's my oldest Nosework friend. We were in our very first class together at Penny's, and now Buck's 10 and Annie's 9, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Super, super cool.
Yeah.
All right, so you have Cassie now.
Right.
Tell us about Cassie. She's a lab mix.
So what's that?
She's a lab mix?
She's she's a field lab, probably mixed with Border Collie. The rest of her litter mates were Border Collies, and so that's what the determination was. She was pulled by somebody in New York. To her and her litter mate, I don't know if it was a brother or sister, they were pulled from a shelter in Arkansas to become service dogs, diabetes alert service dogs. And so somehow Sue Sternberg had a contact, and so took Cassie, her name was Bella then, I think, took her from the shelter in New York and brought her out to Colorado. And at very young, she was maybe 5 months, 6 months, maybe, and paired her up with a 10-year-old boy who has diabetes. And so she was going to be trained to be his diabetes alert dog. And after a fairly short period of time, and I don't know what that was, a week to 3 weeks, maybe, she developed a fear of strangers. And so, in Sue's wisdom, Sue, you know, you bond with a 10-year-old boy and then you're going to take the dog away. So as soon as she could, she actually pulled her from that program and was fostering her. And I had met her at Georgia Canine Camp and was talking to her. At that point, she had met Landis. Landis had done some demos there, and so she had a chance to see him work. And we had a Labrador who was almost 17. And so we knew at some point we were going to lose her. And so I talked to Sue about how could I ever bring another dog into the house, because we'd never been a one dog family. So that was in April. And in June, Sue said, "What kind of dog might you be looking for?" And I told her I wasn't really looking. She said,
"But if you were."
But I didn't know it. So anyway, my husband and I alternate, gets to pick the next dog. And so it was my husband's turn because I had picked Landis. So that'll teach me, right? So anyway, without even talking to him, I wrote her back and I said, he'll want a lab or a golden. I can just tell you that right now. And I was right. So anyway, she said, well, I'm fostering this little black lab and I think she'll fit in perfectly in your house. So anyway, we drove to Utah and with Landis in tow, and they met, and then Sue gave me about a 6-month protocol for it to be a successful match. And about 6 months in, he was quite smitten with her, and wow. It worked. Wow. It exceeded my I didn't want to ever have to live with baby gates all over my house again. I already had, when we adopted Landis, I had a much older Australian Shepherd, who, as he became frail, Landis would bully him a little bit. So we lived with baby gates for about 1.5 years. And, one goes out and the other comes in. I didn't want that.
It's so anyway, yeah.
So I'm telling you right now, you follow Sue's 6-month protocol, it will be beyond, it exceeded our expectations. He became quite smitten with her. She's good with dogs, so that part was easy, but it was him. But she has a whole protocol that you follow, and she teases me because I followed it exactly the way she said I should, which is what I do. Anyway, it worked out beautiful.
Most people do 3 months, but you did the full 6, which is great.
I did. You know what? When you have a dog that doesn't like other dogs and you live like that, it's awful. Anyway, so it became like the best of pals. It was perfect. So anyway, so now I have this new dog. And she's afraid of people. It's the most bizarre. When you have a dog that loves people and doesn't like dogs, and then you get a dog that loves dogs and doesn't like people, you have a paradigm shift in your head, or you're in trouble. But things that would frighten her would be like, I remember one time we were at the Pasadena Humane Society doing a nosework class, and I was bringing her out of the potty yard, and somebody came around the corner, and she's like, that's a scary person. It was just a person, but it startled her. And she was very young, so it was really hard to recover her. So you know what I did? I didn't care that she was going to be a good nosework dog or not. I thought, you know what? I love nosework. I hope someday she'll like nosework. And so I was so fortunate. I took like a year of intro classes with every trainer I could find that was offering an intro class. Yeah. So kind of like my foundation with Landis, where he learned to search everywhere in boxes. I just brought cheese and hot dogs, and she looked for cheese and hot dogs in, I don't know, 12 different classes over the course of a year or so. So, and it got her past, that 7-8 month period, which can be scary sometimes. And it just got her used to, she had lots of exposure to lots of people that never had to interact with her. And she's like, oh, maybe I'm not going to die. So I just built a really, really, I didn't care if she ever, I really wanted her to be a nosework dog, because that's what I love to do. Right. But I honestly, I was intentional about not putting pressure on her to be a really good nosework dog. I just wanted her to be safe and comfortable. And so, so I think what I had sent you in my email, that, she had, her ribbons are over there, so I'm looking. She got her NW1 in April of 2018. She has her NW2 and took 3rd place overall. She has an NW3. She technically has 2 NW3s, but I found an extra hide on her. So, so she should be going for her elite. But I just took the time in the beginning. So you're either gonna. So I think, from what I've seen across the country, you're either going to put the time in the beginning, or you're going to spend the whole rest of the dog's career filling in the gaps. Exactly. And it's just what works for me. I had the luxury of having an award-winning dog. There wasn't any pressure on me to create a really good nosework dog. I just needed a dog that wasn't going to melt in public. I never met a dog like that. Anyway, so now she's a little cautious and tentative in new situations, but nothing like she used to be. And we get through situations just fine now. And cool. I just think from the exposure of, so anyway, so it taught me, here I am, 8 years later, because Landis was in 2008. So here I am 9 years later, having to learn foundation all over again. Because of course, Landis got his elite 2. He got his elite 2 before he passed away. So, we went from, primary all the way to elite 2. I forgot really and I don't teach intro classes. So it was really fun to look at that foundation again. And then once she was introduced to odor, you know, pairing her primary with odor is just it's one of the things we really, really believe in. And I've just seen it just be so extraordinarily successful that, you know, I don't know why we're not doing it more. Yeah. You know, I think people are afraid that the dogs become food dependent then, but I haven't seen it. So anyway, that's what worked for me. I never wanted her to be concerned about a search where there was odor. You know, there was a hot dog there and there was odor. She's like, oh, I know how to do this, right? So kind of building it that way. So
Totally.
Anyway, she's taught me a lot. She taught me a lot about how to build a foundation for a dog that isn't Landis. You know, who's really the dog that a lot of us get in classes. They can't do anything else with the dog because the dog's dog aggressive or the dog is fearful or any of that, right?
Right.
It's just she kind of taught me that whole side of the sport. So
yeah, that's awesome. It's funny you got like both sides of the spectrum. Like put them together, you'll have
exactly.
I mean, that's the way it goes anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's all. It's so interesting what you said, which I totally agree with, as far as you can either put in the legwork with your foundation now and spend your 8 months or your year on primary, which I know doesn't seem like the sexiest. You know, people always want to know, when can I get on odor? And, you know, obviously they know there's a hot dog in a box or whatever. Like, I mean, I get all those things, but I'm the same. I would rather put in the 8 months on primary now than be one of those people who's like, I've taken 12 NW3s and we can't get past it. And really the solution any good trainer will say is like, go back to your foundation and fill in the holes. So if you just do, I don't know, I'm just that's my way. I just want to do it right the first time and then not.
And you know what, there's a lot of, I'm not a professional detection trainer, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can get there. And I'm not saying that any of those strategies are wrong. And I think that people are I mean, what I would say is, you know, let's just look at Ron used to always say the dog will tell you, right? So, you know, if you didn't do a year on primary and you've got your elite and you got there because you introduced odor in the very beginning and that worked for you, that's great. I don't know that it would work for a dog like Cassie, right? So you have a dog who's already nervous and now there's this other thing that she's got to focus on instead of looking for hot dogs, which she does naturally. So I'm not saying that the other methods don't work. I'm saying it wouldn't have worked. I didn't do it with Landis. I probably could have, but I didn't because that's not how we teach.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have done it with Cassie, even if that was how it was done, just because of what I understand about the behavior and building that focus and foundation. So
totally. Yeah, that's a good point. As far as, I mean, it had the same, like Buck in the early classes, he was on odor, either I think week 6 of his first intro class, and then the first week of the second series we started doing vehicles, odor on vehicles paired, and Annie was in that same class and she's elite champion now, I think. And so but 2 very confident dogs that didn't have any environmental issues.
Right.
And I think, yeah, certainly there's dogs in intro classes where you're like, this dog gets it, fine. Or detection dogs that are hardy, resilient,
and
intense dogs anyway.
I think the thing that we forget is, you know, well, that's how all the detection people are doing it. I know, but those dogs were bred to do that and they were trained to do that. And by the time the detection person got the dog, it already had it, the foundation was built somewhere else, right? So that's, you know, I think there's some pieces missing in some of our logic about, you know, well, they can do it that way. And like I said, there are dogs out there who started on odor and they're super successful dogs. But the issue is, you know, are they the dogs that are bred to do the work? And if they are, that's why it works, right? But I think we need to have some leeway. And you know what? I totally get that it's hard to market a class on primary for a year. I get that. I understand that. And like I said, I have the luxury now because I already have my really successful dog. Yeah. But anyway, it's worked out in the end. It's all working out. So.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
people
and
need
she got her
to try.
title like NW1 and NW2 pretty quick, right? I mean, I
Uh,
think.
yeah. Well, I mean, she got her title in her NW1 in April of 18. And so that was probably 2 years of foundation. Yeah, that was probably, she was born in 14. We got her in 15. So it was a good year and probably 2 years of, and who knows, maybe there wasn't an NW1 trial offered before that because there was a while where there wasn't anything. So could she have been ready earlier? Probably, but we just kept doing it. We just kept pairing and so
I think that's great because then, I mean, for the dogs that need it, then you work out all the kinks of I can search in any environment no matter what happens, which there's always going to be something that happens in the environment, you know, that you can't predict, or like the AC comes on or the dog's barking behind the fence or whatever, you know. And so that's cool, you know, her 8 months of primary in a bunch of different locations.
Right. Well, that's my argument for, I mean, I think if everybody who's starting a dog sends an email to everybody they know and say, hey, can I come by for 10 minutes? You don't need more than 10 minutes. With a brand new dog, you don't need more than 10 minutes. And people are like, you're doing what? Right? I'm telling you, if we all did that, the dogs would have, by the time they got an odor, they'd be like, been there, done that. I already, that's, so I do remember one of our very first trials. It was probably our first NW3 trial, and it was in a school, and it was in this particular search was in a lab, like a laboratory. So there were rows of lab tables and the chair, those chairs that you sit in that spin around. They were up on the counter. And so he comes in the door and he goes, and it's a big long room. He goes all the way down to the end of the room, and at the end of the room is a ginormous aquarium, like a huge in the wall aquarium. And he comes running out, and he was like, the wall is moving, right? But because he had never seen that, but take him to, after that, so I took him into Petco and I walked him around the aquariums, like, dude, we got this. And he was fine. I mean, he searched that room beautifully, but that's what I mean. Like, you're not going to ever be able to expose them to everything, but because he'd already seen 100 other things, he was like, oh, the wall is moving. That's weird. Oh, that's right. I'm searching, and get right back into the game. So,
right. You have like your default to fall back on.
Right.
Like when in doubt, something weird happens. My very first trial was actually up here before we moved up here, and it was at Camp San Luis, which is like a working military base. And there was a rifle range in the background, and people were doing their drill, marching and shouting, and some of the dogs like couldn't hang just with all the weird. And then some dogs were like, "Oh, that's weird. People are doing weird stuff, but those work,"
Right.
And that's like, how, I mean, there's so many things that how could you predict? So if you just have that really good foundation, then that's what the dog can fall back on.
I lost the signal a little bit.
You back?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I was just saying that, like, if they have their foundation, then no matter what scary happens, they can, always fall back on that and know what to do and how to respond, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So tell me what you're working on now. You have seminars, webinars coming up.
I'll pretty much, not this year because I'm going to Australia for 3 weeks, so that's like the end of my vacation time. But in 2021, right now, I'm just starting to book 2021. So I mean, I travel all over the country and do seminars. The most popular seminar I have going right now, and I've been doing it for probably 3 or 4 years, is hide placement, and I can modify it any way the host needs it modified. But the way that it's structured right now is it's a 2-day seminar. You come for both days. The first hour and a half ish, I go through a PowerPoint presentation. We kind of talk about what are the considerations for hide placement. Why are we talking about hide placement? Why is that important? All that kind of stuff. And then I put everybody into small groups, and then each group gets an assignment card. All right, you're going to set a hide for an NW1 dog. You're going to set a hide that has converging odor. You're gonna, and I think what's really important about that is a lot of us, when we're not in class, we're probably practicing. And so maybe to make that practice a little bit more intentional, but to really understand, it's really to understand how odor works and what happens when the air comes on and what happens when that door opens 45 times 2, right? And how come dog number 1 worked it this way and dog number 40 worked it this way, and things like that. And so we spend the next day and a half setting hides, running dogs, videotaping, watching the videos, and talking about, you know, how did that order, why did it work that way? How come the dog worked it that way? All that kind of stuff. So that's a really popular 2-day. I've done it in a day. And that also works. So instead of doing 4 elements, we only do 2 usually, or maybe 3. And so that's the most popular one that I'm doing right now.
Cool. And I've been to it, and I can say it's fantastic and super fun. And I think it's even if you're, I think even as an instructor, you can learn more. And then if you're just setting hides with your students, or not your students, but your friends, you know, like there's a couple groups around here that just friends that set hides, and I think everybody can learn a lot from it. So it's an awesome seminar.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I have a converging odor seminar. I have a inaccessible hide seminar. I have a 1, 2, a 3 seminar. So I'll build whatever you're looking for.
Cool.
So yeah. So that's what's happening. Cassie and I are waiting for our next NW3, and we'll see. In the meantime, I'm volunteering a lot, and when we have trials again, you know, I'm out there. I volunteered a bunch already this year. I think as instructors, I mean, I'm a CO, I'm a judge, I'm an instructor. I volunteer as often as I can, because there's no better education than watching a 35 dogs, 25 dogs work the same hide over the course of an afternoon or a morning or a day. Just amazing. So
I agree 100%.
Yep.
Yeah. And you're working on a book?
No.
Oh, I thought you'd mentioned a book. Well, you should. Maybe I misread that. I thought you said you're working on a book. I was like, great, that's so cool.
Not that maybe
just
you
put
read
it in there. What else was I was just gonna ask you something, but I was gonna say, I wonder what's gonna happen with all the trials. I feel like now when our stay-at-home orders were lifted, then there's gonna be like
a mad dash to fit it all in before summer.
Yeah, there's gonna be like 10 trials all on like 4 weekends and double booked and whatever.
Well, what's really cool about what's happened, I'm not really part of the trial side. You know, NACSW is kind of split there. I don't want to say split, but you know, there's a trial side and then there's the education side. So I spend a lot more time on the education side, but I'm a competitor, I'm a CO, so I'm on the trial side somewhat.
Yeah.
I was not responsible for any of the discussions that went on about changing the NW3 structure. I've judged a couple of the trials in the new structure, and I think it just has opened up so many more opportunities that I think we might be able to maybe stretch our trial schedule into summer a little bit now, because we don't have to have, so I mean, we have to have each one of the 4, but we could do vehicles and exterior in the morning if that's what we have to do, if that's what the site allows, and then we can double up on the other things in the afternoon. So I think it's going to open up a lot more, and then it's not, you know, do or die, right? So you get most of the, you get a qualifying score, and then you qualify the next time and title the next time. So I think with the sheer numbers of, it's interesting that Landis's K9 number was 007, and Cassie's is 13,000. So I'm sure we're at 20,000 by now. 20,000 dogs out there doing nose work. It's just it's amazing. It's amazing. So we can't possibly keep up with, you know, unfortunately they're in all different levels. But there is a bit of a bottleneck at 3. So I think this is really gonna really open it up and spread it out a little bit. So make a lot more sites more accessible for what we need. So
I know. I think it'll be cool. It'll be interesting to see too. Like, you know, I've heard a little bit of feedback And with any new change, at first people are like, no, I don't, want it. But I think all that, it'll make everything a little bit more accessible, which is cool.
Yep.
So and
good.
also, sometimes like people complain one way and then you change it and they complain the other way. So you got to just figure out what works.
Yeah, somewhere in the middle is, and I think you alluded to it earlier. We've only been around 10 years. If you think about how long I don't know anything about agility or any other dog sport, but I would imagine there had to be some ebb and flow with certain things, and then other organizations branch off just like they did with this one. And, I don't know anything about what AKC is doing, but I know that it gives people a lot more opportunities if nothing else, it gives you a lot more opportunities to train in other places. When you hear a no, you're like, well, it's just another training day, which is how I used to look at it. Right. So anyway.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. All right, Barbara, thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was awesome.
It's been a lot of fun to talk about what I love so much now,
Yeah. So, I know. I think it's such an amazing, we all owe so much to this sport, which is so cool. Awesome.
Yeah. It's been fun to be there since the beginning. And, the nice thing is, when Landis passed away, it wasn't the end of my career. It was I'm still teaching and I'm still traveling and I'm still doing trials. And then I got another dog and now I can bring this other dog into it. And, knowing so much more than I did then, but yet basically having to start all over because she was a very different dog. And I think sometimes, there's a learning curve for the handler. I think, we come in and we're like, well, I can do, well, that's different. Right. So I had a learning curve when I brought in my second dog, and we'll see, what the next dog looks like and all of that. Kind of had both ends of the spectrum. So
your next one's going to be. Yeah. No, it's a good point.
I think either one of them for a minute. It's just been phenomenal.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard too, having pressure as an instructor, or, people are watching your news, your search to see if you can not call an extra hide or whatever. And, I think there's that amount of pressure, but then it's also you haven't been running Cassie 4 years. So, and maybe it won't take 4 years to gel with her, or maybe it'll be 3, or maybe it'll be 5. I don't know.
Right.
Every dog's different, but, and then there's just trial nerves and stuff, but I think, every dog's different. And
right. And for me, when I get her out of the car and she's excited to be there, I feel like I've already won. What she gives me beyond that, it is just extra. For her to jump out of the car and go, I'm ready for this, or that's right there. From where we came from, where she was just like, I've not been here before, I don't know. For her to hop out of that car and go, okay, let's go find that odor.
That's cool.
I've already got everything, so it's expensive training day.
I know. Which is, one of my students recently was like, what do you get when you win? And I was like, a ribbon. You're paying the ribbon. I don't know.
If you get that little white ribbon next to it, that's the really important one, right? Sometimes the
internal joy it brings you, or the stress. I don't know. Just you either like it or you don't. But I think the teamwork part, and that joy when you see your dogs just so excited to work, there's just nothing for me.
Right. And I'm inspired. You know what? When I judge, I'm so inspired by, unfortunately, when you have to say that NO word, and how people, the dog was like, oh, rats, and the handler's just like, oops, let's go. That goes so far. For me, it's really hard to pull it together. But those are the teams that I know are there because their dog enjoys what they're doing, and they're not. We all want the ribbon, but they're really there to support their dog. And it's really inspiring to see that. And I see it a lot. I see it a lot all over the country. So we're doing something right.
Totally. And how many, because NACSW is just detection, or working dog handler judges and stuff like that. But how many detection trainers are like, wow, your dogs are better than some of our detection dogs, or your little Maltipoo source that, hi, or, you know, like
Right.
all the time they're amazed at what
They are.
our little pet dogs do, the
They are.
blind dog or the senior dog or whatever. I'm just like, it's such a cool opportunity.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks again. I really enjoyed it, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday now.
You too. Thanks so much.
Blue sky. Bye, Barbara.
Bye.